Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, today's the first Wednesday of the month, which means it's time for Kathy Hester's Vegan Kitchen. This is the Mardi Gras show. She's going to be making Cajun white beans from a can and andouille cauliflower. Please welcome her back to the show. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, and hey, everybody. I lived in New Orleans for 12 years. So locals go away for Mardi Gras. However, there's still some stuff that happens. They go away for Mardi Gras Day. So 12th night and all of that. So parades have already been happening. They're not going to just happen on Mardi Gras Day. That Mardi Gras Day is a little intense, and that's when locals tend to leave. There are lots of small family-friendly parades. And one of the things I was thinking when I was trying to decide what to make for the show is I think sometimes Mardi Gras gets a bad rap because you think of all the drinking, you think of all the super fatty foods. It's called Fat Tuesday, right? And you have pancakes, which of course we can make whole food, plant-based, no oil, and different things like that. So I thought it's some of my favorite foods, and I've taught a couple other classes. In fact, in Kathy's Cooking Club, we're doing even another New Orleans style class on Saturday. So one of my favorite things to do anyhow is to make a spice blend, right? So those of you who may not be familiar with New Orleans or Louisiana may have never heard of andouille. It's just a kind of sausage, just like there's Polish sausage and Italian sausage and breakfast sausage. And what's different between all of those, um, as far as I'm extracting. So let's be clear, I'm not telling you to go eat meat. We're having obviously a whole food plant-based, no oil option that also doesn't involve going and getting some already pre-made vegan meat or something like that. You don't have to use cauliflower. We're going to do it today, though. Another great way, if you're like, I wanted something a little chewier, soy curls are often really good. So if you can have soy, they're made with non-GMO soybeans. They're just cooked, smushed, and extruded. So they don't have a lot of issues. And I'll show you, your mileage may vary depending on who you follow and why you follow it, if you can have soy. But when these are just like little dry things, they are cleaner than TVP, which is often made with GMO ingredients and things, not always. And what happens is you just pour some hot water or hot broth, squeeze them out, and basically they look like chicken tenders. So that's one thing we could do. And I'm just going to go ahead and break down about half of this cauliflower. And I thought you could use frozen, but I thought maybe we would just do this real quick in case you haven't done that. Now, another thing before I cut this, if you wanted to save some cauliflower steaks out of this, cut off either side and use those. And then we could have cauliflower steaks. Actually, I could go ahead and I could demo that. And that's a way, and we're not going to use any of this green stuff, though it's not poisonous. And honestly, if you wanted to put some of the smaller leaves in a homemade cruciferous crunch, you'd save some money, which I'm always interested in. Chef AJ knows how cheap I am.
You are not cheap. You're thrifty.
Well, I don't like waste. So like the things that are bigger, I'm going to put in my compost. And I'll let you see it from overhead too. So see how I cut that out? Now I have this perfect cauliflower steaks. So I'm just going to take the knife and get this bottom part off of here. Cheryl has finally gotten into cauliflower. Like she is team cauliflower so hard right now. And it's making me so happy. So when we have a cauliflower steak, I know this is a little bit beyond the scope of today. You want to make sure it's held together with all of this stuff you might normally remove. You could remove, see, that's not so tasty. So we could get a little bit of that. And I guess, hey, it's not that it's not tasty. It's going to be really, really tough. And, we're going to get enough fiber out of this. So see how it's all held together? Then you want to go about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Cut this down. And your bonus recipe for today is throw this into a slow cooker, maybe with some carrots, some potatoes, make a little sauce, and then you could cook it all day while you're working and you'll have a lovely dinner. So there's that. And I'm just going to cut this up into some florets. You could do the whole cauliflower as well. It's not like anything bad would happen. But this is literally the third time I've made this recipe recently. So sometimes they're going to break off into good florets. And like, see, that one's too big. You want them to be approximately the same size. And we could even, since we're doing this live, we can make it a little bit smaller. These are pretty thin. So even though they look bigger, they're not really that much bigger. A lot of times the cauliflower will be like, hello, I would like to be this size, please. Oh, and that's a big guy.
You know, you can eat the green part. Like when I make my cauliflower bisque, I just put the whole thing in and it gets tender and delicious.
Oh, that's a great idea too. I love not buying cruciferous crunch and making it. It's my thrifty nature, I think. But yeah, it is totally edible. I'm gonna cut these down just a little bit more. And we'll cut, the bigger it is, the longer the cooking time. We're gonna throw this in the Breville air fryer behind me. However, this will work in the oven too. We're gonna put it on 400 degrees and we're gonna cook it for, I think I say 10 minutes. Let me double check that. 5 minutes. What we're going to do in that 5 minutes is it's going to start to cook. It's going to start to like release some of its juices and become wetter. If your cauliflower is really old and that doesn't happen, later on we could toss it with a little bit of water, broth, or aquafaba. But so far, even when I found one in the back of my fridge, and it worked out just fine. And you could toss this in any sauce or spice blend that you want. So I know a lot of you guys have my 4 favorite spice blend printout, and Chef AJ's favorite barbecue blend of mine is in there. So we're just going to put them in here. We're going to let them cook for 5 minutes. We're going to make this spice blend. So we're basically making like a dry rub out of it. And so let's go ahead and make this blend. Blends do require extra ingredients and things like that, but it's just not that big a deal, you know, once you kind of get them together. So some of the things we're going to use, let me make sure I've got this where we can see it. We're going to use some ground celery seed, some garlic powder, onion powder, allspice, oregano, thyme, marjoram, smoked paprika, cayenne if you want. We'll talk about some things you can substitute, and I'll show you the blend. And it smells so good. It smells just so very good. What makes sausage? So like if you see vegan sausage patties, the only thing that makes them taste like sausage is the spice blend. And same thing for meat. Sausage comes from a long tradition of people trying to eat meat that's about to go off. So in the very past, so these spices helped it taste delicious. So imagine what it will do for some food that actually tastes delicious already. So I'm on team spice blends. So we're going to put a little bit of nutritional yeast in here. We're going to do about 2 tablespoons. If you can't have nutritional yeast, just leave it out. It just adds a little extra umami and it's kind of nice. Same thing, if there's something you're allergic to or can't have, just leave it out. Just let it go. It's all going to be okay. We're going to do 2 teaspoons of thyme. Let you see this from above. I know it's not super exciting, but it's pretty easy to do. And andouille sausage is native to New Orleans. We're going to do a little bit of oregano now. And so this is a spice blend I really haven't seen anywhere, and I'm not sure if it's not super populous around the US. It can be often hard to find it in a salt-free blend. That's 1 teaspoon of marjoram. I love marjoram. A lot of people don't have it. You could just use some extra oregano. I promise the andouille police will not come to your house. Gonna do some garlic powder. I use garlic powder and onion powder a lot, and we're gonna talk about it a little bit more when we get into making the beans. And these beans are gonna be creamy beans. Now I'm using a teaspoon of smoked paprika. I'm kind of short of showing you this. Can you tell I put it in the wrong thing and then kind of backtracked with a label? So if you don't like smoky flavors, just use regular paprika. And then we're going to use a 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder. You can use as much or as little cayenne as you want. If you like spicy, you do you. Cheryl doesn't like spicy, and this cayenne, I don't know if it's original to this, is quite hot. So I'm just going to put in like a 1/4 teaspoon. But you in the recipe, and you can get all these recipes. If you look into the description under the video, there's a link where you can go to sign up to get them. And it'll come in a nice little PDF that you can print out with pictures and everything. I'm going to use about, let me see, a 1/16. So it's like like a 1/4 of this, a 1/4 of a 1/4. So just a little bit. And an 1/8 of a teaspoon of allspice. Oop, that's a 1/2. Let me get and you want to be, pretty mindful, like the celery seed and the allspice can overpower it pretty quickly. So start with smaller amounts. You can do that also. I'm trying to see. Yeah. Oh, and an 1/8 of a teaspoon of black pepper. You can always do just a little bit. Blend this together, taste it, and readjust. And in fact, I encourage you to do that. If there's an ingredient you're kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that, start small. Okay, this is just my spice grinder attachment that comes on to, and actually I think I can show you better from this side. So see, it's just, this is the grinder. It's a smart, or the Ninja, it's Smart Torque. And this guy is just a spice grinder attachment I got for it. Even though most of these spices are already ground, putting it in a spice blender, the Beast small blender container or another small blender container will help all those ingredients really incorporate well. So when you sprinkle some on, you get a little bit of everything. If you just stir it around, I don't feel like it incorporates the same. Going to be loud for just a minute. Possibly. There we go.
Many of you guys use marjoram.
And that's really enough. So if we did this with whole celery seeds, then I would have gone longer. But see, it doesn't have to be like absolutely perfect blended into oblivion. And what you can do, and I encourage you to do this, is to take a little teaspoon or a little thing, mix it around, and then you can take a little taste. And what I say to myself, and what you should say to yourself, does everything taste kind of evenly? Does one thing kind of poking me, standing out too much? Or is one thing, if I look down the list, is there something that I don't feel in there at all. This feels pretty well balanced to me, but sometimes it'll be like oregano. Maybe you substitute oregano for marjoram and now it's too much. So what I probably would do is come in and add a little more thyme, add a little more smoked paprika, and you can just keep playing with it. But it's really, really easy to do. We have a couple minutes while those cauliflower is going. Do you guys have any questions? Please put them in the comments and Chef AJ will tell me about them. So for these 2 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and start water sauteing some onions. So then we'll talk about white beans, what I mean by white beans. We're going to use canned beans. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But let's start with a little onion sauteing. This is just half an onion. If you did not feel like sauteing onion today, you could use onion powder instead. I think I didn't get any garlic out of the fridge either. So we'll
Kathy, you have when you're not using oil, and when you used to use oil, did you use it a lot? And do you notice a difference now when like either in the taste or maybe like you're saving money because you're not using oil anymore?
Oh, I'm totally saving money because I'm not using oil anymore. I don't really, because hopefully everyone knows we do 90 to 95% starch solution. And what that 5 to 10% means is that sometimes we go out to eat at places that have vegan food that have some oil. We're not eating Beyond Burgers, but we're going to the vegan Indian buffet. So we still sometimes taste that oil. And in fact, we don't like it. That's not just us trying to, toe the company line or anything. I find that this tastes nicer and it doesn't leave that little ick in your mouth. So that's what I would say. How do you feel about that, Chef AJ?
Well, I think cleanup is a lot easier when you don't use oil.
Oh, way easier. Way, way, way easier for sure. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? If it's that gross to clean up, what is it doing inside your body? And I try not to think about that too much, but I do. I put a little bit of water in here because this onion was a little bit older and drier. So I knew it was going to need a little help. When I water saute often, or when I oil-free saute, I usually use a little bit of water. If you ever watch any of my classes I do in Kathy's Cooking Club, sometimes I add more because I'm making a whole bunch of different dishes at the same time on different places. But if you put too much in, it will steam the onions instead of sauteing them. So I'm just going to set that over here. We're going to toss our cauliflower in the andouille spice. If I can move that where that won't be all up in everybody's face. And we'll take a look.
I wish I could buy pre-sauteed onions, that were sauteed in water or broth.
I have actually sauteed onions in the freezer right now. And I was going to talk about this, which I did in the dehydrator class that I taught. So this is cooked mirepoix. So it's onions, celery, and why did I just forget? Onion, celery, and bell peppers. And so I cooked it and then I put it on a dehydrator sheet. And I could have actually thrown this in instead of any of the things I'm doing, which is kind of nice. Another thing I've done, two either way will help. Cut up a bunch of onions, put them in your slow cooker or your Instant Pot, but I do the slow cooker and let them cook slow all day on low. And you could either just freeze some of those because they're delicious and so low effort, and or you could dehydrate those. When I dehydrated those, it made these beautiful onion chips by accident. So with this cauliflower, and let's see if you can see up here a little bit. So there's just a tiny bit of moisture on here, and that's all we're looking for. And I'm trying to see, how am I gonna, the best way to do this, let me pull it back so you can see what the heck is going on. And I put a piece of parchment paper in here so that I could do the little pieces. I'm just going to funnel all that right in here. You can see on this paper, there's a little bit of wetness. And that's what I was talking about that was going to happen naturally. I'm going to add a little splash of water over here because I'm off doing something else. Now we're just going to put about a tablespoon. It depends on how much cauliflower you're doing. So I'm going to put some on the top. And if we find it doesn't stick, like I said, we can add some water or aquafaba, but so far it always sticks. See, it's already starting to stick. And I'll get a spoon. And usually what I do is I put some on, I move it around, and you can put as much as you want on. I'm just saying you're probably going to need a tablespoon or two for sure. But if you want it, if you're like, I love that spice, it's so delicious, or my husband hates cauliflower, but I bet I can get him to eat it with a little more flavor on it. And this doesn't have any flour or anything like that on it, but it still gives it a little bit of a crust. There's no salt on here. You could also toss this with salt or salt substitute if you wanted to. But my plain salt substitute is onion powder, celery seed, and garlic powder. So all that's already in this mix. Okay, I'm going to move this over, see if I can do it without burning myself. A little bit.
So, I've never known that you can put paper on a air fryer tray.
You can. You don't want to have it go real far out, and you don't want to have, I'll show you over here. You don't want to have it go to where it's really close to the heating element because it will catch on fire then. So what I wouldn't put paper down for would be kale chips that are going to lighten up and fly away and then not hold this down. This cauliflower weight, even after it's cooked, is going to hold this parchment paper down just fine. Especially in the Breville or toaster oven style. So the heating elements are about here. So on the Breville, it says where to put your air fryer tray. So if I had this too far up and it was coming, the parchment was coming up to touch it, that would be an issue. And we're just going to cook this on 400 for 5 more minutes. Does that make sense, Chef AJ?
Yep.
Now, if you have one of those kind of egg-shaped with the basket, you have to be much more careful. So what I do still put parchment on, especially if I make a batter. Let's say I made a batter of cornmeal and oat flour and those spices and some water, and I battered it. I would put, and I'd make sure it's not loosey-goosey. I'd put it on the bottom, and then I put these very wet, heavy pieces of cauliflower. Then what I do is I flip it for the second one and peel it off because the top part's now dry, and that way it won't be real stodgy on your air fryer. Let's take a look at these. We'll come down a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead, add just a little more water. And then I'm going to get some garlic out of the fridge. If you're like me, sometimes I'll do a whole bunch of garlic, but Trader Joe's is just packed in water and it's already done for me. So I'm just going to toss in, I don't know, about a teaspoon. And that's the thing with making your own food. If you hate garlic, you can leave it out. If you really love garlic, you can be like, Kathy's crazy. I'm going to add way more than that. Okay. We just want these onions when we're cooking them. And especially when we live with Cheryl, who doesn't like the crunch of onions, I just want them to get kind of clear and transparent. Also, if you're cooking an onion like a Vidalia, it's going to be sweeter. And I don't know if you can see, let's see if you can over here. Can you see some of the little greener parts? That's because spring is coming and my onions know it. If your onion has some green, it's just like a regular green onion growing out of your onion, that is edible. So you don't have to throw those out. And I'm going to go ahead and use some pre-cut up tricolor bell peppers from Trader Joe's. And I said about a cup. And here's the thing, I can tell you nobody's mama out in Louisiana measured 1 cup of bell peppers. It was how much bell peppers she had. And you don't have to have tricolor bell peppers. You could have red ones. You could have orange ones. It's just a little bit more. So it'll be prettier.
Have you ever seen the those Trader Joe's fire roasted onion and bell pepper? I love those.
I have some of those too, and I almost used them, but it's frozen in one big solid block. So I decided that was not something you needed to see as an audience. But I will thaw them out for sure. And also, even at Wegmans and Kroger's, you can go ahead and buy fajita vegetables that have onions and peppers in there too. And if you happen to have, if it's watching this and it's summer or something like that, you certainly can use fresh. There's no problem at all with that. A lot of times I cut them smaller before I throw them in, but we're going to be mashing up some of the beans already. Oh, I didn't hit start. Oh no, it's preheating. We good. All right, so there's a couple ways you can go with this too. So let's talk about the beans while this is sauteing. So the first thing I always get is, Kathy, what do you mean by white beans? And what I literally mean, beans that are white. Cannellini beans are fine. Great Northern beans are fine. I don't think I have any navy beans. I think I have a bunch of Great Northern beans. You could use a combo. We could use the cannellini beans and some Great Northern beans. White beans in general kind of have this a similar amount of starchiness, especially the ones that you can buy canned. If you're looking at Rancho Gordo heirloom beans, or like the giant lima beans, those are a little different, but you could use them if you wanted. It just wouldn't be traditional. But, you know, don't worry so much about that. Now, these are, I have some that are low sodium. You can get some that are no, all of these are low sodium. Excellent. And we're going to do these a lot like I do my red beans. And by that, let's get it. I mean, I'm going to, oh, you guys already measured out things. So let me get another measuring cup to put my bean water in, because we're going to use our bean water. And so I have this handy dandy little can drainer. And it's just, get that over here. It's just really easy. I got it at a conference. You can buy these too. So we're just going to open up this can of beans. And you can do these with pre-cooked beans, of course, always. For me, this is a meal that if you only have a teaspoon left of energy to do, it's a good one. And we're going to use the aquafaba in our cooking. So if you made them from scratch and you don't have it, you could just use broth or water. So I'm just going to turn this over here. And then some of that's going to come out. And I do have some really good gumbo recipes on the site. And I'm getting ready to try and update my butternut squash gumbo, because now I have 3 flourless roux recipe or ideas, concepts that I use. But if you go to plantbasedinstantpot.com, my mushroom gumbo is there. It has a floured roux, but it's just oat flour. And a roux is just what makes things thick and yummy. And typically in red beans and rice, white beans and rice, and you can get accidentally vegan versions of these, and they are full of fat. And not only are they full of fat, they're full of cottonseed oil, which is, it's not good for you. It's a very, very dirty oil. But the beans are super creamy, right? Because of the oil. And I'm going to show you what I think is a cool trick, anyhow, about getting these to be creamy and thick without that. I'm going to go ahead. I want to get a good spatula that I can cut these, or I'm not really cutting them. I'm just going to break apart some of, now that they're not as frozen, I'm going to just kind of go in. We're also going to mash beans too, but I'm giving them a couple of little places to encourage them to go the way I want them to. I do this a lot with frozen vegetables. Cheryl doesn't like big pieces. If you like big pieces, leave them big. You don't have to, you know, you're not feeding Cheryl, just me. I've got this. Now we're going to go ahead, and there's two ways you can do this. If you have a salt-free Cajun blend, which I do, and you can do that. You could also do like a blend of thyme, smoked paprika, oregano, cayenne pepper, some bay leaves, things like that. You can even get salt-free Tony Chachere's, I think, but I just prefer to make it myself because that way also I know what the spice level is. And that's kind of important. So while we're sauteing these aromatics, we're also going to activate our spice blend. So I'm going to put some in, and that's just going to toast it a little bit and give it a nice flavor. And like I said, the recipes, you can get the full recipes by going into the description, clicking more, and I'm going to add, I'm not going to add water this time. I'm going to add some aquafaba. And that's also going to help it be nice and thick. And see how that already looks kind of like a fun sauce, just the way it is. And if we need more liquid than we have aquafaba, then I will add some water, or you could add some broth. And in fact, let's go ahead and put some bouillon in here. I have bouillon cubes. Both of these recipes can be gotten at healthyslowcooking.com. Just look up bouillon. This is my dry bouillon mix. So you can use that kind of like a spice, or I can pull these out real quick and show you, because I always have these on hand in the fridge. It's freezer is kind of in my little thing. We can just, these are my frozen vegetable bouillon cubes. They just have onion, celery, thyme, and carrots in it, and nutritional yeast, but you could leave that out. So let's go ahead and put 2 of those in instead of the dry bouillon. Now you could use any bouillon cubes that you like. Speaking of how cheap I am, the reason this was my first mad scientist recipe. In my first book, I realized I was going to spend most of my advance, which was not very large, on buying better than bouillon. And that's 14 years ago when it wasn't as expensive as it is now. I'm going to turn this up a little bit so we can melt that in. And the reason we're doing this is we're trying to get all of that long cooked flavor into this very short cooking dish. And traditionally, red beans and rice is something you eat on Mondays in New Orleans. And that tradition comes from, that's when people did their laundry. And I'm not talking about like us where we, took our bags to the machines to do our laundry in college. They went down to the river to pound out their laundry. So these women who had 80 bazillion things to do couldn't be making dinner. So they could put red beans and rice on and let them cook all day, which is why these beans got so creamy and delicious. White beans are offered just the same way as red beans. It's kind of like an exciting change of pace in the red bean genre. And you probably could use any kind of weird heirloom bean you want if you're cooking them from scratch. 1 can of beans is approximately 1.5 cups. But the way they're doing shrinkflation, that could change, right? Sometimes it's like it used to be. I'm just going to go ahead and get any of that out. Get both those cans in. You could do half the recipe and just do 1 can, though this recipe will freeze. And if you've already made rice, one of the things Cheryl and I have been doing lately is as soon as I make a dish that goes over rice, we take the extra rice, and actually I can even show you. We did this with some Indian food. So then it's just ready for us to pop in the microwave. If you don't use the microwave, you can put it in, this container is also oven safe. And I've just been getting a bunch of these at like TJ Maxx or Home Goods.
That's a very cute cup. Hey, Kathy, I watched your interview with Heather McDougall. I'm curious, were you nervous? That was very good. How was that?
It was good. I think at the time I wasn't thinking it was going to go on her YouTube channel. So y'all are seeing me in a corner of the bedroom. So that's my only regret, is that I wish I had had better video equipment going on. I think I'm always a little nervous when I'm talking about myself, but at that point I was really excited about the program, and I'm still really excited. In fact, that there's a book coming out that Cheryl and I are talking about our McDougall experience and with some recipes. So we're still Team McDougall, slowly but surely. I certainly haven't lost all my weight, but my first goal was met pretty quickly as far as my liver numbers coming down, and same thing with some of Cheryl's numbers. And I think it's really easy to get frustrated and think, oh, now I'm doing really well. Why is that whole 100 pounds not gone? Or why is that 200 pounds or that whatever? And Chef AJ, you and I have talked about that before, right? I think people think, so this is the secret weapon, and it doesn't have to be just this one. You could use an avocado masher, a baby one. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this seem like it's been cooked longer and that it has some kind of extra creamy element by literally mashing part of the beans. And I'm going to try and get some of these bell peppers in there too, so I can get those smaller. And you can do anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 the beans. We can just see how we feel. I'm going to turn this up just a little bit more. I want to cook some of that liquid down. I want this to seem like it got simmered on some great grandma's stove while she was doing the laundry down by the river, and be incredibly grateful for all of the things that we have in our lives that lets us, spend more time in the kitchen and less time by the river doing work. I want to spend more time by the river relaxing. And the tricolor peppers really do make this pop a little bit. And I'm doing this more to try and get some of these peppers. And we're just going to cook it down a little bit. While that's happening, our cauliflower is ready. So we'll take a look at it. And so I I put the heat to about medium high because I just want this to cook down some. Okay. But what ends up happening already, this doesn't look like 2 cans of beans that got thrown in with a few sauteed vegetables, right? And I'm going to go ahead and taste it. And I'm trying to, normally I put it over about medium heat and let this simmer for a little bit. I'm going to taste it and see if it needs a little more Cajun blend or not. And I think it could. So I'm going to put a little bit more in. Also, this is a time that you could put your salt or salt substitute in. And this is just my plain old salt substitute with onion powder, garlic powder, and celery seed that can kind of help your tongue get stimulated from some of those salt points. And then this is traditionally served over steamed rice. Brown rice works great. And then on Mondays in New Orleans, they have andouille sausage. You can get it with sausage or without sausage, and it's usually served with a hunk of French bread. And they even have them in the poor boy sandwich shops. There's probably some place that has them vegan now. When I lived there, it was hard to find vegetarian food. So things have changed because I went to hang out with Josh LaJohny and Howard Jacobson before the pandemic in March 2020. And there were so many more vegan options. It was kind of great. So we're just letting this get rich. We want creamy. We want it to have that mouth feel. And so I like to separate my mind. There's a creamy mouth feel that's very separate from that kind of. I never had red beans and rice with fatback or whatever's in it, but it doesn't have that oil. Some people in New Orleans would make vegetarian red beans and rice and put some peanut butter in it to give it a little bit of smoky taste and creamy. But I think that's just not necessary. But if you do nuts and that, or you're trying to gain weight, that's a great way to add some more calories to this. I am on the opposite train, so I am leaving it out. But look how, isn't that crazy how creamy this looks?
Yeah. Hey, Kathy, Chef Sonia, who's watching on Instagram, says she loves your bouillon cubes.
Oh, thank you. And what I love, they're so cheap and easy. So you can do it in the slow cooker, the Instant Pot, in your Dutch oven on top of the stove. And once you make, now I make a triple or quadruple batch, freeze them in ice cube trays and pop them into a bag just like you saw. So I do it about 4 times a year. And then it's just always there. I'm going to go ahead and turn this down a little bit. Let you see it from overhead, and we'll look at the cauliflower. But see, look, that doesn't look like something you just popped 2 cans and did 15 minutes. Isn't that crazy? It looks like this creamy, long cooked dish, and it tastes that way too. And you do you. These are traditional flavors. You want to put some shredded kale or like a chiffonade spinach in there and add more greens. I think that would be delightful. So there's all kinds of things you can do to really make this your own. And let's take a look at this andouille cauliflower. And so now we've got like a little bit of crunchy edges. It's browned. It's full of flavor. I leave the little pieces in here too, even though they're going to get a little bit crispier, almost like a chip, compared to this, which is going to be succulent. And I find that the stems on these cauliflowers almost have a texture that reminds me of shrimp. So this would also be good in a sandwich. I've made, if you go to healthyslowcooking.com, I do have like a cauliflower po' boy, which is like shrimp po' boy to me. It's so good though. And Cheryl absolutely loves it. Because she's like, why can't I eat that? I'm like, I have to do a class with that. And so this is going to be our lunch. And you could just make the cauliflower. You could put the spice blend on broccoli for less time. Cauliflower allows more cooking time. You could do it with soy curls. You could put it on tofu, tempeh, carrots. In fact, I'm going to be trying a thing with carrots over the weekend too.
So Laura Beth is saying the temperature of the oven for the cauliflower, but guys, you can get the recipes. There is a link in the show notes. Show notes are only visible if you're watching on YouTube. We stream it a multi-stream, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, but the show notes are the drop down under the video. And if you click the bit.ly, you can get the recipes there, but she can also answer what temperature for cauliflower.
In the Breville, I'm doing 400. So you could do 400 to 425 in your oven.
And Latif,
oh, I was just going to say the difference between using a toaster oven or a Breville versus using a regular air fryer, you're going to cook probably half you might put it in for 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, because you're more crowded. It's a very small space. In your oven, this took 10 minutes in the Breville. It might take 15 or 20 minutes in your oven.
thank you. And Latif says the aquafaba that you added, was it from the canned beans?
Yes, right from the cans. I don't really have to separate it, but I've gotten into the habit of it. That's why I had to cook it down a little extra, because I really went a little overboard. I probably would have only used half the aquafaba. But
Okay.
you know, when you're starting to cook with it, I think it's nice to set it to the side, see how much you need.
Thank you. And Ina says, how do you cook onions in a slow cooker? All the online recipes call for butter and oil. In one of my books, Own for Health, I show you how to do it in a crock pot. It's amazing, you know?
Well, I have the vegan slow cooker. The revised vegan slow cooker is completely vegan. The very first version doesn't have oil-free options, only because the publisher put them back in. I asked them to do options, and they took all the option out. But in the revised, it is there. If you go to healthyslowcooking.com, my website, there's tons of recipes. I'm going through in some of my older ones from like 2010 through 2013 and making sure they have oil-free options that were taken from the original book. But it's very easy, you know, to instant pot or slow cook. Actually, it's almost easier than anything else because you're not really sauteing in there at all, right? So you're either sauteing outside and putting it in or using onion or garlic powder. So if you found a slow cooker recipe that said, I want you to put oil in there and put onions, use onion powder, leave the both out.
There's a question, do you do pizza and what do you do for the crust?
I do pizzas. It kind of depends. I think the answer is dependent on what your dietary preferences are. Like, are you gluten-free? Are you SOFAS-free? Are you SOS? I like Julie Hassan's pizza recipe, and I make her dough without oil. That works really great as a regular one. I've not made her gluten-free one, but I should, because now I have some gluten-free non-alcoholic beer, that's a lot to ask for people. But sometimes you can just do a tortilla. Like the smaller almond flour tortillas at Trader Joe's don't have oil in it. The larger almond tortillas that are burrito size do. So you're going to have to read labels. Sometimes you can get like lavash, and I didn't read the label at Trader Joe's, but I saw that they had some pizza crusts. So I don't know if those have oil in it or not, but I would go back there and look at that. You can definitely get pizza dough there, and I don't know if there's oil in it. So if oil isn't an option, like if oil doesn't bother you, you're okay with it. There's 80,000 options. You can even get pre-made crusts. But you could also make like a pizza potato. You could have a baked potato, cut it open, mash it down like I did with that sweet potato pie a few episodes ago, where I made that caramel apple pie on a crust of sweet potato. Leave the skin on. Put tomato sauce, your toppings. I don't have out a mozzarella right now, but if you made a plain no oil cheese that I have that would melt, that would work just fine too. So if you give me more dietary information, I'm happy to see if I can tweak it for you.
Chef Del was on Sunday and he did a pizza party, all oil free.
Oh, well, then that's what you should be watching.
And I've never tried it, but Plant Strong, Rip Esselstyn does sell a pizza kit and a pizza crust, and I've heard lots of good things about it.
I've heard good things about it too. I do have some different crust mixes that are gluten-free. And whenever it says something like add oil, add an egg, just make sure you're adding something. Like with oil, it can be really nice to use applesauce, pumpkin. Aquafaba isn't going to quite do it, but you could add in some aquafaba to the mix as well.
Matthew's saying, I totally need a pizza dough recipe without oil, so just refer to Sunday's show. And Latif is saying, what are show notes added before and after? That's actually a great question. And for those that really want to know the technology, I can't add the show notes until the show begins because I'm limited by a certain number of characters by YouTube. And a lot of times the guests give me too many. And so if I do that, it doesn't work. So usually why you see me kind of like so busy is I'm doing that at the very beginning of the show as I'm putting in the guest show notes. So yes, it usually takes about 5 minutes from when the show starts, but then you might have to refresh your screen, but then the show notes will be there. So thank you.
And that form is going to be up just forever. So if you're watching this 6 months from now, you can still go to that link and get those recipes. I'll leave it
And
up for sure.
where do you search on YouTube? People are asking. I am just putting it in the well, actually, you can't see the chat if you're watching on Instagram or Facebook, but it's youtube.com/c/Chef AJ. So if you just look for Chef AJ, if you can watch on YouTube, I'm told that's the funnest place because that's where the Zoomunity is. It's a big community of people that are here every day, pretty much, and they're talking to each other. So give that a try if you can.
I know my community too likes it when I go live. Almost everybody has switched from going to Facebook to going straight to YouTube. And then you get notified as soon as Chef AJ goes live as well. So make sure that you're subscribing, you click the bell, and that way you know when she's going live too. And then you can get all the good recipes.
Are you doing anything special for Super Bowl?
No, I am not a Super Bowl person, but I probably will try and get some good appetizers out on my email list because I know other people are interested. I've gone to Super Bowl parties in the past. I've been talked into it because, it was party and now I'm, well, yeah. Well, in New Orleans, you don't go to, well, I didn't go to Super Bowl parties. I'm sure in New Orleans, Super Bowl parties exist, but everybody goes to Mardi Gras parties. You go to parade parties. And that's a lot more fun because then you hang out, everybody eats and talks, and then you go see the parade and you catch some stuff and you come back and you talk about all the stuff you caught, like beads or toys or just all kinds of crazy stuff. In the St. Patrick's Day parade in New Orleans, I don't know if you guys know, they throw cabbages, potatoes, and carrots for Irish stew. So you can catch yourself some dinner at a parade or get knocked out by a cabbage. I've had some people have some ouchies from cabbage tossing.
Dixie's commenting on your shirt. Without my glasses, I
Oh
thought it
yeah.
was cauliflower, but I've actually been to the Piedmont Animal Sanctuary. When I had my television show many years ago, they did a commercial. I mean, it was like they were a sponsor. They didn't pay, like it was to promote them, and they were one of the places I went.
Well, and that's just in Pittsburgh. That's where Howard Jacobson used to live, but this is their new shirt. And I judged the Triangle Veg Fest mac and cheese contest on Sunday, and part of it was a fundraiser for the farm refuge. And I didn't know they got cows since I've been there last. So hopefully I'm going to go back and see if I can go live there. It's kind of a little rural, or at least film going and seeing the animals because they're just delightful.
Have you been to the pig sanctuary yet? She's
I
been
have
to my
not, and
show.
I thought I was going to see the lady. I saw her last year at the mac and cheese, so I was hoping to see her again. But I've been just kind of backed up. But I want to, if she emails me, if you see this and you email me, I will come and I will film it and put it on my YouTube channel because everyone needs to see cute pigs. But I am shameless when it comes to cute animals and petting them. And yeah, shameless. So I don't know if you know this, but like our friends hired some goats to eat their poison ivy in their backyard. So they had like a little goat party, and I was filthy because I was rubbing. There's a picture of like 5 goats all around me, and I'm trying to touch them all. And out of the 4 of us, I'm the only one who didn't get really bad poison ivy. So either I'm allergic to it or the cuteness cured me immediately.
You know, she was at the same seminar you were at when you came to visit me last September, but I don't know if you guys met.
We said hi, but it was so busy to say hello to everyone, and that was really great. Have you decided if you're doing that again this year
Yeah,
yet?
I think July 7th. You want to come back?
I kind of do. What is it like there where you live in July? Is it really hot?
I mean, for me, it's not even been hot at all here. So I'm not the one to ask about weather because I'm always cold. So I don't find it hot at all here. I find it very cold compared to everywhere else I lived.
Okay, I can
But you
see.
know, they do have a thing now. It's called air conditioning. And when you go in, when you go inside, it's nice and cool. So
That I understand. And we go hot places. I also lived in Arizona for a year, and that was way too hot and dry for me. Are
see,
there any other? Oh,
we've been
go ahead.
having rain every day, and to me, I'll take the heat anytime. I mean, especially if it's a dry heat, you know? Let me check if there's any more questions.
I want
Um,
to agree with you, but like I felt like when I lived in Arizona, I could feel the moisture being sucked out of my soul. Maybe as
um,
I get cold and older.
on Instagram, Vegan Alliance says, "Where is it and what's the name? Is it close to Miami? I'm going there soon, and I want to see some animals in a sanctuary." So the ones we're talking about are in it's North Carolina, right, Kathy?
Yeah. But I bet you I would be shocked. I know there's a few sanctuaries in Florida, so I would do a Google search and see if there are any farm sanctuaries. You might even know if you look at Happy Cow, which is an app that can give you vegetarian and vegan restaurants. Sometimes they will have the animal sanctuaries in there as well. And they do lots of fundraisers and dinners and stuff. You might actually catch a really cool event.
Ryan, I am near Sacramento. I'm in a suburb called Roseville. That's about, I think, 31 miles east, but that's the closest airport. And Tracy says, Kathy, did you boil the cauliflower first?
Did I boil?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So if you probably came in a little bit late. So I cut the cauliflower. I cooked it for 5 minutes by itself with nothing on it to do 2 things. One, to kind of cook it some, right? Because it would be too tough if I didn't do that. The second thing is that brings the moisture up to the surface. So when I toss it in this dry andouille spice blend, it sticks just fine. Because you guys see, isn't it kind of crazy that I didn't do anything but just cook it 5 minutes? And look, I mean, it's really stuck on here. And I think that's what people think, oh, I can't do it that way. And I'm always like, I wonder what will happen if I do this. But I want all of you guys just to enjoy these super creamy beans though. And there's a red bean and rice recipe that's pretty much the same. It's really close and similar. You can also get that on healthyslowcooking.com. So you can go over and get that. At some point, the andouille recipe will be up, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen. But it's in a PDF, and you can have that right now.
Andouille. Have you ever made kielbasa?
I have, because Cheryl's family is half of her family is Polish. And so I have made an andouille spice blend as well. I mean, a Polish sausage spice blend as well. I've made it. I did a whole class that was gluten-free, big sausage, and I made it with vegetables, beans, grains. There were some flours like oat flours, and I think I did some teff flour in there, and steamed them just like you would wheat gluten. And they held together and sliced like that. So that's a really good thing to do as well. It takes a lot of time, and you might as well make a triple batch if you're doing it.
Mm. So no Super Bowl party for you. Do you ever do Oscar party?
I don't either. I'm kind of boring when it comes to that kind of thing. Now, if you were here and you invited me and you said I get to bring something, then chances are really good I'll come because then I get to play in the kitchen and make something fun. But like I kind of take it in little spurts too. I was thinking about this because for over the pandemic, we watched like all the RuPaul drag races. Those made me really happy. And then lately, it's a cross between Korean romantic comedies and like Japanese love reality TV shows. So kind of like it's not like The Bachelor, but they're just and what's the name of that show we watched, Cheryl? Do you remember? The Korean one where they talk, there's a little panel and and they're so polite. These people, these young Love Inferno on Amazon and just watch it because they're so polite and they literally go, well, now that we've been talking for a while, let's speak informally. And so they use, and obviously it's being translated, but I just think it's really fun. And then there's like a whole group of people and they'll go, "Whoa, he touched her hand." And it's just
If
so,
you like Korean shows, have you seen The Extraordinary Attorney Woo?
oh, I love that. The
Wasn't that the best?
Attorney Woo. And
No,
actually, I did a Korean class and I made kimbap, and that's who I thought of. I'm like, I'm making kimbap for Attorney Woo.
that is the best. Have you ever made candy out of fruit? Hmm.
Like, I don't really make candy because I try to avoid using a thermometer at all costs. It's kind of like semicolons. It's an unreasonable fear. But one thing that probably the closest things that I do with fruit that would be sweets, they're not candy, is I dehydrate fruit, like slice strawberries and dehydrate them. Those are great to eat like you would
Have you
candy.
ever tried dehydrating watermelon?
No, is it cool?
It's really good. But the thing is like, it shrinks down to nothing. They sell dehydrated watermelon at places like Sprouts and Whole Foods at Trader Joe's, but it's like really expensive. Like, a little tiny bag is like $5 or $6. But you can imagine watermelon is mostly water. So you put it in there and it's like, where did it go?
Oh, that's funny. The main thing I do with fruit for sweet stuff, and I know Chef AJ does this too, is Ninja Creamy Pints, right? Because like that's the best way. So like with seasonal produce, one of the things I'll do, especially if I'm making a sorbet, is I'll use a can of pears in its own juice. Usually I use about half of that for a 2-cup pint Ninja Creamy. The 3-cup pint Ninja Creamy, you have to do 1.5 times. Um, and then you can puree some of the fruit. I find the pear gives it plenty of sweetness, even for fresh strawberries, maybe not in the middle of season, but like for right now, what do we have now? We have oranges. So I don't always like to just freeze orange in there because it can come out a little bitter. I've done a can of oranges in juice and I wasn't a huge fan, but I think if you did part pear, part oranges, that would work really good. Add a little bit of oat milk or your non-dairy milk of choice, and you can make an orange sherbet with that too.
Sounds delicious. You are a magician, a wizard. No, you're a wizard. You're not a magician.
You're awesome.
But
And I'm
thanks.
just, thank you so much.
Ooh, you're coming back in March, and it's exciting because you're coming back the week of the Vegan Health Bundle. It's just because that's when your show is. And so you'll be able to, we can't really talk about it too much, but you'll be able to do something from the bundle.
Well, and I was wondering, and we can talk about this later too, if maybe instead of a demo, that maybe Cheryl could come on since one of our products is talking about some of the stuff we did. What do you think?
Well, of course, we love her, but who's going to do the tech then? Not you. Of course.
But and you can tell me, or we can do both. Cheryl was kind of like, well, maybe we can talk and make something.
What I would do in a perfect world is either do both or have something prepared because I think because I know what your product is and people kind of like a visual. So you don't have to necessarily cook it live, but have some food in the equation because I think that helps a little bit,
We can totally do that. And I'll
It doesn't
look and
have
if
to be
it,
a full-on two-camera demo, but you could just say, like, well, we'll talk. But yeah, no, we would love to have Cheryl on.
I know everybody loves Cheryl. They like her better than they like me.
Oh, that's funny. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. This was a wonderful show. Thanks everyone for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time for Vegan Doc Talk, where you get to answer. Well, you don't answer them. The doctor answers the questions that you guys, yeah, you answer the doctor's questions. Dr. Scott Harrington answers medical questions that you send in advance, knowing that you cannot take it as actual medical advice. We do have a disclaimer. And tomorrow, one of the topics he's going to talk about is how to avoid toxic food. Thanks so much, Kathy. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. It's always my pleasure. Have a great time and everybody have a really great Mardi Gras.
Yep. And thanks a lot, Cheryl, too. And we'll see you guys tomorrow, we hope. Bye, everybody. Now that I'm streaming on so many places, I got to end it like so many different times. And I don't know why it's so hard to end on Instagram. It is the hardest platform. I'm clicking it. I'm clicking it. There we go. So now I'm still live on the other three. So I got to say goodbye again. Thank you guys.